Like to be a free man? The butterfly asked. I myself don't know. It's being free in a way, yet constrained in another. Like frolicking carefree in an open garden, but suddenly cuffed on discovering a sign. Keep off the grass. Too many barriers, yet so many possibilities. It's drowning in fear of problems and impending dangers, yet swimming in hope. It's lilting within infinite dreams, but not being able to fulfill them. It's being a petal of dust and a receptacle of purity. It's making a guess whilst knowing an answer. It's pretending to be and being to pretend. That's funny, said the butterfly, disappearing effortlessly amongst the brambles. Thank you. I really hope you enjoyed that. If anyone has any questions about anything to do with me, then I'd be happy if you could put it into the chat box or say something.
Yeah. Can you read one more of your poems?
Yeah, I'm happy to keep reading. I have a few that I have here, but if anyone has anything they'd like to ask, then I'm here for that too. Okay. So my second poem is titled Quiet Flows the River. This poem was inspired by one of my visits to India, my last visit to India actually in 2018, when I'm originally from West Bengal, Kolkata, and so we visited this place where you can see the border between India and Bangladesh. And I remember when I went there, I had this very poignant image in my mind of being able to see a whole new country from the other side. It was just a few, I'd say just a few meters away from me. I could practically see it. And there was just the Mahananda River, which separated the two countries. And that image stayed in my mind for a very long time because I was so mesmerized by how there's a whole new land in front of me and yet I can't go there. And since I'm three quarters Indian Bengali, but some of my family is also from Bangladesh. So I thought it was a great way to sort of connect to my roots, even though I couldn't go there myself. So this poem is called Quiet Flows the River. I stand at the border of two time zones, a river separating two nations, half an hour lost in the gap of time. The river flows quiet as if to console, bathing in its waters an enmeshed culture, a language submerged in tears. Ripples pattern the water between water hyacinths and lotuses bordering the banks. A fish swims past effortlessly, knowing not where it is from, nor where it goes, but that it is present in this moment. On the other side, I hear the muezzin's call for evening prayer. On this side, the smell of incense diffuses to the sound of blowing conch shells. I pause for a while to listen. Children sit on the cold floor of an old temple courtyard, chanting poetry in rhythmic unison. Their teacher supervises. The sentry stands at a distance under a thatched check post. Rifle in hand, he oversees. Tomorrow is Independence Day. Thank you.
Yeah, just a well, because I don't know Bengal well, although I've been there a couple of times. Where is Mahananda, the river you are speaking about? Which district?
So there's a place in West Bengal. It's called Pashi Dewa, but it's a place my grandparents took me to where you can see the border between India and Bangladesh. I'm not sure about what district it is in, but I know that that is the name of the place. I'm not sure if you wanted to know anything more.
Okay, because we generally know of another border from films. This is where the Padma river flows. Have you seen the Padma?
I haven't seen it, but I know about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that is something like a very dream-like river. And our filmmaker, uh, Ritik Ghatak, has made a film called Komal Gandhar. And there you can see about a couple of people sit in a hotel room looking across the Padma. There's a scene from the film. So Padma we know as the
Uh-huh.
border between India and but Mahananda is new. I don't know if anybody in the audience knows, but for me at least Mahananda is new. So I just wonder where Mahananda is. Is the place predominantly? I mean, is it somewhere in the south of Bengal?
Uh, I think it's. I'm not really sure. I think I know
Yes,
it's
okay. Because
Darjeeling
the
No,
district,
sir.
so it should be North Bengal.
uh, North Bengal, okay, okay. Because the images that you drew, the muezzins chant on the other side,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm.
the priest blowing on the conch here on this side. So I
Mm-hmm.
was just wondering if it is Murshidabad, it's pretty well balanced on either side. Okay, because if you
Yeah.
look back, you can hear the Muezzin's call also. So I was just wondering where this place is. I'll find
Yeah,
out
of
from the
course.
map. Okay, okay, okay.
No, I was
Right.
just in my poem. I just wanted to highlight the differences between each side.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know
yeah.
that there's
I got
obviously a
you. I got
balance of culture in both, but yeah.
you. I got you. I got you. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So shall I
Iona,
read
I'm
another?
Omar.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
second, Iona. Uh, um, I'm Omar, Iona. And
Yeah. Hello.
I like the poem titled Museum. It had something to do with museum. Are you going to read this poem?
I will read that too. Yes, I can
Okay,
find
right.
it. One
Because
second.
it's quite a good poem. That's what I felt.
Uh-huh.
Okay, would you please
Okay.
read it? Okay.
Yeah. So this poem is titled At the Museum. Living in the UK, it's really taught me that this country likes to uphold itself for representing many cultures, since it's such a multicultural place to live in, and there are people of so many different nationalities and countries living here. But a lot of the time, I think what we fail to recognize is they're kind of representing cultures in the wrong way by looting and stealing from them, such as even the British Museum. They've stolen many of Egypt's artifacts, which rightfully belong to them, and yet are displaying it here for people to see. And even something like for the crown jewels, like the Kohinoor diamond, they stole it from our country, India. And so seeing these different artifacts in the country I live in now made me realize how we shouldn't really always take things for face value. And so I wrote a kind of bold statement in my poem At the Museum, which was challenging these concepts. I dwell within the chambers of a euphemism, an almost palindrome, six-lettered warehouse of plunder. The only somewhat native artifact, the blood-stained soil of an unholy civilization, all of which came in time out of a million human thoughts. Each automatic door, almost as if a gust of ancient wind passing through the glass. A threshold to revelation of sugar-coated pillage from splendid lands. Showing the world within a few ephemeral hours. Rocks as old as the universe, chipped frescoes and revarnished vases, rows of porcelain and bronze figurines now embalmed in single treasure rooms, masking the grit and grime of rapine. I question at times the misrepresentation denoted within false acceptance. Stolen heritage replacing bare lands built from oppression. Memories of human thoughts trapped in each footfall. The fading scent. Sorry, I'm not. I think. Sorry. I think some of this poem might be on a different page. Yeah, sorry. I'm not sure where the rest of this poem is. I think there's only part of it on this page. I don't know why that happened, but yeah, sorry, I found it now. I'll just start from that stanza again. I'm really sorry that happened.
Okay.
I question at times the misrepresentation denoted within false acceptance. Stolen heritage replacing bare lands built from oppression. Memories of human thoughts trapped in each footfall. In rooms of the pasts. The enormity making one forget of all that it is worth. The echoes of an infantile rhyme may leave your lips with disgrace. Finders keepers, losers weepers. To which we retort, weep as you lose the pillars that uphold your nation. Weep as the marble gives way to weathering, because nothing, or almost nothing, really ever belonged here in the first place. To them, to you, or to anything at all outside. Thank you. I'm really sorry for that mix-up. I just have a lot of papers here, and some of them are in weird order, so that's why that happened. But hopefully it's all okay now. Does anyone have questions, or can I move to my next poem?
Iona, I'm Omar again. I
Yeah.
actually enjoyed that poem, especially its post-colonial kind of protest. Are you a British citizen now?
Yes, I'm a British citizen. But I,
So
despite being a British, yeah, go on.
being a British citizen, you can write like this. That also, shows how tolerant a country Britain is, despite everything.
Hmm.
And plus, of course, there's a joke that says, the Egyptian pyramids are still there because they were too heavy to be carried to the British Museum.
Hmm.
Yeah. So despite being a British citizen, you can criticize Britain like this, but this, freedom is not there in many parts of the world. That's also something we have to acknowledge. Don't you think so?
I agree. I think Britain is tolerant in that it allows for freedom of speech, that the residents of this country can speak on this country's shortcomings and criticize it openly. But above anything, I think everyone should have the right to do that, whether they're a citizen of their country or not. I mean, despite living here for many years now, I've practically grown up here. I'd consider this country my home. I am still aware of the trauma and the oppression that this country has caused to my home country, India, because I've received that education about it from my parents and family. But I think Britain deserves a huge thanks for allowing freedom of speech. But definitely, I don't think this country educates its students and pupils enough about what they've done in the past. If you read any British history books from here, obviously history is written by the winners. So they'll consider everything from their own perspective, and they consider colonization as a kind of gift to those countries, and they'll constantly praise and uphold themselves. But in reality, we're never taught about the real truths behind what they did. And that is something that I've had to discover for myself through documentaries or through my parents. And that only happens because I'm British Indian. But I know that a lot of my British friends are unaware of or choose to simply ignore what this country has done. So I think that there's a good and bad side to everything. I'm grateful that I'm allowed to speak what goes on in my mind, but I know that in reality, this country is not as tolerant as the world makes it out to seem. I know that in America, there's a lot of news involving gun laws and the rampant racism that goes on here, but I don't think it should be ignored when it comes to the UK, because everything that goes on there, I feel like happens in undercurrents here. It's not spoken about as much or shown in the media or news, and people don't really notice it as much, but it's definitely still prevalent. And my family and parents have faced racism here before, and it's unfortunate, but it definitely happens. And I think we definitely need to speak about it more.
Iona, where do you live in Britain? I didn't read your bio properly.
Yeah, I live in Birmingham. I
Birmingham,
actually
okay.
I grew up in London for a lot of my childhood, but Birmingham is definitely my home. I've lived here for the longest, so yeah.
Yeah, so I was wondering, Birmingham is not very far from London, I
Yeah,
understand. Is it?
it's only about a 2-hour train ride, and
Ah, yeah,
it's the
yeah.
yeah.
So I was wondering if you had been to Hyde Park, Hyde Park
I've been
in
to
London.
while I lived in London, I did go to see many of the famous places there, like Hyde Park. I even went to, the big BBC HQ there. I went to see like the behind the scenes of the BBC and how the news reporters read everything, and the weather people there as well. And yeah, so I'm very grateful to have lived there for such a long time in my life, because I got to experience and see many places that lots of people haven't in the UK. So I do value that, yeah.
Well, I was thinking about Hyde Park because one of our writers in Malayalam, he's called S.K. Pottakad.
Mm-hmm.
He describes his journey to Britain. And once while in Hyde Park, he saw an African speaking. Everybody can speak anything in Hyde Park. It's the paradise for, people who love democratic expression. So this African, he was addressing some Britons who were assembled. It's some 4 or 5 people, and what he said was, "Listen to me, British dogs." So, and these British dogs very patiently listened to what he said. So, probably this book is available in English now. Escape at a Cuts. It's called London Notebook. I don't know if you'll ever come across this book, but if you do, please go through it. It's a very interesting book. So, that was the first time I heard about this place called Hyde Park, where you can say anything you want, and nobody will interfere. No policeman will look your way. Okay, as this African did when he called these people who were gathered British dogs. Okay, so I was just reminded of that.
Yeah, that's a really funny anecdote, and I think it perfectly sums up the sentiments of many people in this country. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Uh, I think we have a question in the chat. As a poet, you must have been influenced by some great writers. Who is the poet who influenced you the most? So yeah, that's a really good question. I think, well, I do read a variety of poets, but over the years, what I've grown to realize is that some of my favorite poets have been people like Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes. I own a number of their poetry books at home, and maybe the poems I have read so far don't really reflect their style very much, but I can assure you that I am greatly inspired by them. Sylvia Plath's only novel, The Bell Jar, is actually one of my favorite novels to exist. And Ted Hughes's poetry book titled Birthday Letters, which he wrote to Sylvia he addressed to Sylvia Plath, is also one of my favorites. But aside from that, I do like lots of contemporary poets who reside in the UK, and I have been to kind of literature festivals and talks hosted by them here. For example, there's a poet here called Simon Armitage. A lot of his work is on the GCSE, which is our kind of end of term exam. Like at the end of school, you take the GCSE exam. It's similar to the ICSE there. A lot of his work is under the GCSE English literature syllabus, and so I got to know him by reading him at school, and I was lucky enough to attend a literature festival in which he talked for about an hour or so. I think this was 2 years ago. And so I really enjoy interacting with many poets nowadays too, and getting inspired from their work. We have another question. Tell us about your reading preferences. Yeah. Okay, well, reading has always been one of my greatest joys. It's something that I really value because I think it's amazing how simple words can kind of transport you to another universe. Um, I think since I was little, I've enjoyed reading a variety of genres. I remember reading some detective novels. There's a series here called the Alex Rider series, which is written by an author called Anthony Horowitz. He writes a lot of detective novels. But nowadays, I don't really read many detective stories like that. I like reading. I'd say The Bell Jar is one of my favorite books. I read a lot of young adult fiction too, such as The Hunger Games, Divergent. I'm sure you all know of those. But yeah, I think my reading taste is quite varied. I also read a lot of the stuff that we read at school too. For example, I've read Jekyll and Hyde. I like a lot of classic literature too, and I think Jekyll and Hyde is definitely one of my favorites because I like how it portrays duality of man and repression, and I like a lot of the themes presented in that novel. So I'd say those are a few of my favorite books. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, hi, Iona. I'm
Hi.
Janaki, okay? I'm also part of the faculty here. So I was listening to you with a lot of eagerness, and I found your poetry really interesting. You
Thank
know,
you.
yeah, and all the best. I hope you flower, blossom into a really fine poet in the days to come. Okay,
Thank you.
yeah. But I just wanted to know. I'm a little curious, Aruna. You are an Indian settled in Britain, right? A
Mm-hmm.
Bengali settled Britain. So, are
Yeah.
you? Do you ever read? We have a very rich field of Indians writing in English
Mm-hmm.
today. So, are you familiar with these Indian writers in English? Do you read them? Do you read any Indian poets who are writing in English? And are you fluent in Bengali? Do you read Bengali also? Literature too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just
So
wanted to know. Yeah.
of course, yeah. So I am fluent in Bengali. I know how to read and write it, and obviously speak it fluently. And I'm very grateful to my parents for teaching me it at such a young age. Because from very early on, I was taught Bangla. And I remember when I was about, I think, 5 or 6 years old, I learned how to read and write it. And I know that a lot of my peers and people in my class, even who are from other countries originally, they don't know how to speak or read or write their mother tongue. So I think it's a huge privilege that I'm able to do that, and I'm very grateful to the people that surround me for that. But I thought that just as a little anecdote, since it comes up, I learnt to read and write Bengali because when I lived in London, there's a place there called Brick Lane where it's a kind of Bengali hub where there are lots of Bengali
There's a
shops.
novel called Brick Lane, right? There's a
Yes,
novel,
there's a
Monica
novel
Alice.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
actually studied part of that novel at school.
Oh,
I can
okay.
tell you about that too. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Brick Lane.
carry on, carry on. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So Brick Lane, there are lots of Bengali shops, restaurants. I remember going there when I was 5 or 6 because I lived in London at that time. And what mesmerized me most was seeing the Bengali street sign, which said Brick Lane in Bengali letters. And I was mesmerized to see a part of my culture in the country I was living in, even though I couldn't actually read it at that point, but I was
Yeah.
still happy to see it. But what happened there was they have lots of shops that sell Bengali textbooks that help little children learn to read and write Bangla. And one of my friends at the time, when I was that age, she was Chinese and she knew how to read and write Chinese fluently.
Mhm.
And I was a little bit jealous of her, you could say, because she would always talk about how she knew how to read Chinese, and I thought that, oh, I must learn how to read Bengali as well, because if other people
Yeah,
can do it,
yeah,
then I should be
yeah.
able to as well. It was a kind of peer pressure, I guess you could say. But I
Oh,
remember
great.
I remember, yeah, I went home that day and I asked my parents about it, and they immediately agreed. So and they took me to that shop in Brick Lane, and I bought my very first Bengali book.
Oh,
And I
wow.
still remember sitting
Okay.
down on the sofa with my mum, and we were tracing over the Bengali alphabets. And my handwriting was very shaky at the time. It wasn't very good. But I remember learning how to write it at that young age. And surprisingly, because you're so young then, I picked it up very fast. And it was thanks to my friend, my Chinese friend then, that I actually picked up Bengali quickly. And since then, I've definitely been very connected to my culture. I attend a lot of cultural events here. There are lots of organizations in the UK that hold events relating to Bengali as well as Indian culture that I'm a fan of. But in regards to your question about Indian literature,
Yeah.
um, so as I think it was mentioned in the introduction, I have done a lot of translation work before from Bengali into
I remember.
English.
Yeah.
Since I can speak, read and write it well, that's definitely a bonus, and that's helped me greatly. But I think in poetry there's a bit of a different language in which things are written. So obviously, although I can read, write and speak all the letters and words, sometimes I don't grasp that inner philosophy or meaning immediately, and so I do take a bit of help from my parents in regards to that. But I definitely still translate works by Rabindranath Tagore,
Oh, wow.
Sri
Yeah.
Gangopadhyay, etc.
Yeah.
I'm working with a Bengali poet who lives in Kolkata. She's translating some of my English works into Bengali,
Is
and
she
I'm
as young
translating.
as you? Is she as young as you?
No, no, she's about the same age as my mother, or a bit younger.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
yeah, quite a
Yeah.
lot younger. So she's not the same age as me, no,
Okay.
but we
Okay.
are working together. She's translating my works into Bengali, and I translate hers into English. And
Mm.
we're hoping to maybe release something. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. There's a Boi Mela in
Mm.
Kolkata. It's or like a book fair, basically.
Is it during October, during the puja
Yes,
time?
during
Ah,
puja
of
time,
course.
yes.
Yes, yes.
And so this is a bit of a far-fetched aspiration, but we thought that maybe once all of our work is done, we can compile it into a book and release it there. I'm
No,
not sure if that will actually
I'm
happen,
sure
but
you will get it done. I'm sure you will get it done.
unsure. Yeah, but I'm unsure about it. But thank you for having hope in me.
No, but
But
because you're so passionate about what you're doing, and I'm sure it will pay off. Yeah,
yeah,
please.
and this country is also very good for opportunities like that, because they have a competition here called the Stephen Spender Prize for Poetry and Translation. Yeah, so that's a competition that's hosted annually, and
Okay.
I actually I took part in it. I think this was 2 years ago now. I took part in it 2 years ago, and I sent in one of my poems I translated. The poem I translated was Amol Kanti by
Okay.
Nirendranath Chakraborty. I'm not sure if you know, but
No, I have
it's a
not. So
very
I've not heard about him. Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
a very famous Bengali poem. You might
Oh.
not know, but yeah, it's quite famous in Bengali literature. But
Mm.
I translated that, and I was actually highly commended in that competition.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
and I
So
got to
you
read
are a
out.
budding translator as well, right?
I guess you
Yeah,
could say so.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right. Yeah.
And I got to read out my poem at a venue in London, which was great. And I'm entering it again this year. And I hope that I maybe win this time or get a higher position. But if not, I'm still happy, because whether I win or not, I think it's still a great way to be able to connect with my culture. So yeah, I hope that answered your
Absolutely.
question.
Winning and losing are purely, I mean, those are things which don't matter at all. It's the idea is to be part of a process. There is this cultural confluence, and I'm really taken up by the fact the way you're connecting to your roots is very interesting, Iona, because we keep talking about this, diasporic literature, etc., in our department. But so to have actually a 15-year-old girl going so seriously into this process of creating poetry, and that was so consciously connecting back to your roots, that is a huge learning experience for us also. And I just wanted to know one thing more before I think others who may also want to ask you questions. But since you told me so much about, how deeply you are into Bengali poetry and Bengali literature, I was just wondering, because earlier you said that you like Sylvia Plath, Simon Armitage, etc. So do you think even Bengali poetry does influence you a lot when you write poetry in English? Your Bengali, heritage, legacy rather.
Yeah. I'll be honest, what you said about being deeply involved in Bengali literature, I wouldn't say deeply. I have read it quite a bit before, but obviously because English is my first language, I find that a lot easier to grasp. And another thing is because obviously there's like a whole Bengali alphabet that I can read very well, but because I'm a bit of a slow reader, it takes me a little bit of time to decipher each word. Sometimes I end up losing patience with what I read just because it becomes so tedious and long for me. But my parents have helped me in sort of understanding Bengali literature more. But I wouldn't say it's influenced me to the extent that English literature has. I definitely admire Bengali and Indian literature because I think a lot of the poems I've read may not have been as kind of deep or profound as the things I read in English. I try to read a lot more simplistic things, simple things that have strong metaphors is what I enjoy, since it's what I can understand the most easily. So I don't know if it's influenced me as much. I do take
Yeah.
inspiration from the legacy that those poets have left behind, because Rabindranath Tagore he was a versatile genius, really. He wrote so much nature poetry, which I like doing too. He composed songs, he wrote plays, and I even in the UK here, I remember taking part in an adaptation of one of his plays. It was called his play is called Dak Ghor, which translates to the post office. But here we adapted it to something called Chiti, which means letter.
Yeah.
And we did that about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was an adaptation I did with children of my age, and we acted out as different characters of the play. So his work continues to influence me to this day, and I'm grateful for that, very grateful. But I'm not sure if it always reflects in my writing, but I think there's always something at the back of my mind that is there influencing me and is a kind of drive for me. So I do agree with that.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Thank you. It was really a pleasure to hear you talk at length about this two languages, two linguistic cultures, and how you draw from them in a different ways, though, but still they are there.
Yeah.
Two rivers flowing into
Uh-huh.
you. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah,
also wanted to mention one more thing, especially because you were talking about the book Brick Lane by Monica Ali.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I actually only discovered this book in September or October of last year because as part of the GCSE English Literature course, we obviously have to study some books and poems and things. And in practice for that, we're given kind of extracts from books and we have to
Okay.
analyze them and do work from that. But
Yeah.
this year, so I've just finished year 10, I'm going into year 11. But in year
Okay.
10, one of the pieces we were given was an extract from Brick Lane by Monica
Okay.
Ali. And
Yeah.
upon just seeing that title, I'd never heard of this book, surprisingly, but just
Oh.
seeing that title, it genuinely did mesmerize me because my teacher had a full-on slideshow and a PowerPoint describing the book and just gave a little synopsis of it. And there was that one picture of the street sign from Brick Lane that I so vividly remembered. And I read that first extract from the novel, and it's about, I think, a young girl who is kind of married off at a young age, and she moves to
Yes.
London, Brick Lane at a young age, and she's sort of feeling a kind of identity crisis because it's so different to what she's used to in Bangladesh.
Yes.
But
Yes.
upon reading her extract, there were so many cultural references and words that describe Brick Lane and East London. And because I lived in East London for 4 years of my life, that really struck me. And after we finished that lesson, I personally went up to my English teacher and I told her how much it meant to me, seeing that she covered something something that was
Yeah.
part of my culture in the literature course. Because
Mm.
a huge problem in this country is a lot of the writers that we read are all kind of so written by old white men who don't really have anything to do with us nowadays. They're less contemporary for us, and we can't relate to them as much. But seeing
Yeah.
something so new and refreshing, and that too connecting with my culture, it really rejuvenated me. And it sort of it struck me to the point where I even wrote a story about it. So I wrote a story about a young girl who discovers her culture being represented in the English
In your
literature
syllabus, right? In your
syllabus
syllabus.
for the first time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that, yeah, it inspired me to the level where I actually sent that story to Monica Ali, the author.
Right.
My mom managed to get in touch with her through one of her agents by
Oh.
email. And yeah, it was quite a cumbersome process, but I managed to get in touch with her and I sent her my story and everything. And she was incredibly pleased to hear that I'd enjoyed it. And she replied back very enthusiastically. And that was a lifetime experience that I'll never forget. So since you
Oh.
brought that up, I thought it would be good to share.
Wonderful, and you know, when you were talking, and I just remembered that you were just 15, and I was so surprised that you hadn't heard of this novel till a year back, you know, just
No,
last
yeah.
year. But you know, when I read it even before you were born, because I
Yeah,
read it only 15 years
there's a
back.
movie. I'm sure
Yeah,
there's a
there's a
movie
movie.
too.
There's a
Yeah,
movie too. Yes,
yeah,
yes,
we watched a little bit of the movie as well, and I
yes,
think
yes.
I haven't read the full novel yet. I've just read a
Yeah,
bit, but
you
I'm
must.
definitely
You
going to
must.
read.
Please
Yeah.
read the whole novel at the earliest chance that you get. And I'm
Okay.
sure you'll find a lot more to relate in it. Uh, thank you for that anecdote. You know, in relation to Brick Lane, it just goes to show how much a syllabus means to many
It
people.
does. It really
Syllabus is
influences
not,
young
yeah,
minds.
exactly. So because we teachers are constantly revising syllabus, you know, trying to redefine it in so many ways. So this is a very telling example that you've just told us how much it matters to people to see themselves represented in the syllabus. Thank you.
Agreed. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah,
That's
thank you
okay.
so much. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sure others have questions. Yeah.
I know. I was very impressed by the reading preferences you rolled out.
Thank you.
Detective fiction, young adult fiction, school stories. Incidentally, these happen to be my reading preferences as well. I mean,
Oh.
they used to be my, but I didn't become a poet. I suppose that's the way the cookie crumbles. Some people become poets, some people don't. Well, so, but your preferences I've been recommending to my students for dogs years. I don't know how long. So I am retiring next year. So I have one more year to recommend them, and now I can invoke you. I'll say that the young poet Iona also like detective fiction, young adult fiction, school stories. So there you are.
Thank you. Yeah. Should I read another one of my poems, or does anyone have anything else?
I just Googled your name, and I
Okay.
came across a very, an interesting bit of news. Like an Indian origin girl in top 1% of the world's brightest people. So that's again about you. So it was about an IQ test. Would you please tell us something about that?
Yeah,
And
I
I'm
think.
surprised,
Uh-huh.
it's yeah.
Then, yeah, so that was, I think it was mentioned in the introduction. I'm part of a high IQ society called Mensa. It's the oldest high IQ society in the world, and what you have to do to enter it is a kind of IQ test, basically, which I did when I was 11 years old. And thankfully, I received the highest score possible, which is 162. Um, and I was admitted into the high IQ society, and um, in this, yeah, the part about the top 1% thing, they usually say that because a lot of other people who have had the same score of 162 were people like Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking, who also achieved that same score. And so they usually say 1% because it relates to that, basically. But I don't compare at all to any of those people, and I feel rather embarrassed by that headline and whenever it's mentioned to me, because I mean, I don't think that I have any place against people of that stature. So please never talk about me in reference to the top 1% of the world thing, because it's not true. it's true in that circumstance, but not in everyday life. But yeah, that's basically what that's referencing. But being part of the Mensa Hierarchy Society for the past 4 years now has been a really enlightening experience for me, because I've got to attend lots of events with other society members, and they also run things called SIGs, which are special interest groups. They post out newsletters, and I'm also an editor of their I'm a junior Mensa editor of their magazine. And so I'm greatly involved in everything that they do. And because they're a global organization, I'm pretty sure that you can enter wherever you live in the world. And I'm just part, obviously, because I live in the UK, I'm part of all the UK opportunities, but I know that there's a lot going on in America and probably India as well, if you research a bit more into that. But they're definitely a great opportunity. You should definitely take part in their IQ test if you can, because it's such a great community to be involved in. So yeah.
I'm sure, no, if I take part in it, I will lose. I will get failing grades. That's why I don't take it.
No, I mean, I took that test completely. I didn't prepare for it or anything. It usually
Okay.
asks you very subjective kind of questions. A lot of the questions are quite confusing. I think there's a common misconception that it's maths related, but I'm not the best at maths. And I mean, if it was maths related, I know I wouldn't have done very well in it. But it asks you a lot of I'd say philosophical questions almost. I'm not sure how they even decipher a right or wrong answer from there. It's a very, I'd say, confusing test that makes you think quite a bit. But I took the test without any preparation, not expecting to get anything. And I think that's the way you should take the test if you are planning on taking it. So yeah.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah, I can read another one of my poems if everyone wants. Or if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.
Carry on with the poem.
We'll
Please.
listen to your poem, please.
Okay, yeah, let me just find the right one, just so I don't make that mistake again about not finding half the poem. So this poem that I'd like to read now, it's titled Homecoming, and I entered this to one of the most prestigious poetry competitions in the world, which is the Foyle Poetry Competition, and I was actually picked as one of their 100 selected poets last year. And this poem I thought would be very significant to read in this context, since we've spoken a lot about my, Indo-British background and how it feels being a British citizen, yet carrying that Indian heritage in me. So this poem, Homecoming, talks about that kind of balance of identity, but also the feelings and pangs I get whenever I visit India every year. And because a lot of my elderly relatives live there, I've noticed that when I go back every year, I'm able to almost watch them deteriorate in physical and mental health. And that was something which has really left an imprint on me as a young child. And so I thought that would be a great topic to write a poem about. So this is Homecoming. Draped in sun-dried cotton sari, Ma spreads turmeric paste on my acne scars. The heat and sultriness making it crack in flaxen grains on the cold tiled floor. Twiddling a cotton ball soaked in hibiscus red alta between index finger and thumb, she adorns in curlicues the soles of my feet in neat masterstrokes. Thereafter, a crash course on Bengali customs. Remember the pranam, do touch her feet. And we get ready for Grandma's home. The hinges to the garden gate screech to welcome us in homecoming. It has been 3 years since oiled last. Ma ushers me to Grandma's room. I expect a family heirloom of some sorts to unfold. Sweetmeats or spicy mango pickle in oil left lined in glass jars on the terrace to dry in the midday sun. or perhaps an old trunk, photographs and books opening floodgates of stories untold. It is dark here. A monastic silence pervades. My pupils adjust to the gloom. The street peddler's chant seems distant here, and rickshaw honks certainly not as loud. Grandma looks up, smiles vaguely, conceivably in recognition, tries in futile attempts to edge the stainless steel glass of lemon juice, as if to wash the barriers that bind us. She is paralyzed and bedridden. 13 years now. I sip the juice, hold her cellophane hand in mine. Nails charred, fingers wrinkled from centenarian grime. Old memories line her parched skin, carrying tales from the crevices. Queen Victoria, Dhaka, riots, the partition. Do steamboats ply on the Buriganga River? She suddenly asks. I listen, the sourness from lemon fermenting in my mouth. I am not sure what to say. So much has elapsed. Feeble voice now raised in command, she looks to the metal grill window. Kill those soldiers, they looted us. I gently shove the red ants aside. She calms. I watch her eyes roll like in a trance. At times I feel Grandma records everything. Family stock keeping, her responsibility. Spools of uncoiled tapes binding her tighter to bed. Her stale recording studio. And now, we replace chocolates with chewable vitamin orbs. Staffordshire pottery for a featherlight bedpan. More donations than gifts for a happy housemaid and monsieur. Our suitcases grow lighter with every year that slips by. Bags unzip to the stench of expiry, yet bringing much more to all than we leave back home. Thank you. I thought I'd explain some of the cultural references in here since a lot of it relates to Bengali culture and not Indian culture as a whole, so they might be a little bit harder to understand. But alta is basically this kind of red pigment that it's a decorative pigment that women and girls use, and they use it on their feet and hands. It's a kind of so it's a kind of decoration similar to like how mehendi is. But there's also a lot of references to the partition, as this was inspired by my great-grandmother, who actually grew up in Dhaka but was forced to move to India because of the partition and the riots going on in Bangladesh at the time. This poem was greatly inspired by her because I was very close to her while she was still alive. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2019. But I wrote this poem thinking of her completely, and also about the foil competition, which I sent this to. Obviously, I was one of the 100 selected poets, which I'm very thankful for. But they're also hosting a poetry residential here in the UK, in a county called Shropshire here, where some of the judges of the foil competition, as well as a lot of other prestigious poets, will be kind of coaching and guiding us. And I'm actually going to that residential on the 9th of August, which is in just 5 days. And that will last for, I think, 3 days. So I'll be away from home completely alone, with lots of unfamiliar faces around me. But it's a great opportunity, and I'm looking forward to meeting some of the other foil poets. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. If anyone has any other questions relating to this poem, do let me know.
Hi, Anna. Not exactly relating to this poem, but then since you were talking about cultural references, could you tell us about the difficulties you experience in translating from Bengali to English? since you will come across a number of cultural limitations. Could you please talk about that?
Yeah. So there's obviously a very common phrase, lost in translation. I think that phrase is definitely applicable to my situation because there are many things, idioms and sayings in Bengali which cannot have a direct English translation. So that is usually the biggest difficulty I face while translating Bengali work, since there are a lot of typically Bengali sayings that really you can't express in English in any other way because their true meaning is only held in Bengali and in no other language. And I'm sure that applies for many other languages, Malayalam even. It applies for everything basically. So that's usually what I find the most difficult. Apart from that, I think I mentioned this before, but because English is my first language, not my first language, it's just a language that I'm used to speaking in more because I interact with more people in that language. Bengali is also very closely by my side, but because English is what I use more and what I consume media and literature in more, that's what I'm comfortable with. And when I read or write Bengali, when I read or translate Bengali literature, sometimes, as I said, I lose patience while trying to read some of the words because of the Bengali alphabet and how I'm still a bit of a slow reader. But sometimes they'll use a lot of long phrases or words that I don't immediately understand. Sometimes they're even written in a kind of older Bangla rather than the normal conversational Bangla that we speak nowadays. So I do have to get a lot of help from my mother and my father when I do that. But they're definitely very good at helping me in that circumstance. So I don't ever have huge problems while translating, but those are some of the difficulties that come to mind.
Thank you. More questions?
Yeah, if anyone wants to unmute or type, I'm okay with either. Okay. I can read another one of my poems. I do have quite a few here. I'll just find
Yeah, please
one
carry on. Please carry on.
I'll find one that I think you'll enjoy. Yeah. Just a second. Okay. Yeah. So this is a poem that I wrote quite a few years ago. It's titled Peaches. I'm sure when you read it, I don't think I really need to give an introduction because it's best experienced while I'm reading it, but I think I'll just dive into it then. Peaches. You always reminded me of peaches. I remember how you opened your mouth to devour one. Your lips awakening sleeping cities where cannibals wrote poetry about pomegranate necklaces. And crows waited on rooftops for dusk to dawn upon them. Your rusty metal wind chimes in the garden where we used to eat peaches on deck chairs still remind me of our bones clashing together in a fight about some petty thing, like forgetting to take blood pressure pills when you When you had cancer, I bought you those double cotton pillows with money from your niece's old piggy bank to prop you up high so I could keep refilling the bowl we bought before marriage with peaches. You even coined a phrase I say every day to myself to cheer me up. Instead of, I'm over the moon, you said, I'm over the peaches. And I cried when you said that because I thought you meant you liked apricots more. I'd say this is a pretty mature poem for the age I wrote this. It was inspired by a lot of the love poetry I was reading at the time by Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes especially. So I decided to depict this kind of failing relationship, which was growing distanced and drifting because of the deteriorating physical health of one of the partners in that relationship. Obviously, this poem is written purely out of imagination. It's completely inspired by the works I was reading at the time, so I don't have any personal experience that I drew on while writing this. But I thought it would bring a different flavor to this. And since I mentioned Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes, I thought that I should definitely read this to sort of show you how they've inspired me in the past. Does anyone have questions?
It was beautiful.
Thank you. I do have more poems. I can keep going if you want. I'd appreciate it if people had other questions though, because then it would give me something to answer.
Yeah, just a question.
Yeah.
And do you have a collection of poems published?
Yeah. The one in the yeah.
Is there a collection of your poems?
Collection of
published?
poems. Well, my poems have
We
been
don't-
published in children's anthologies before. Yeah, carry on.
So I was just wondering if we could get an anthology of your poems, if they come out. But you seem to have written quite a lot of poems.
I
Have you
have
thought of
written a lot.
collecting them into a
Yes,
book?
I've been writing
You have.
since I was about 8 years old, so I have had quite
Yeah.
a big collection since then. It's been around 7 years since then, so there is a lot. I have been published in children's anthologies, or a lot of the times the competitions that I enter publish anthologies with the winning poems in them. So I have been published in those, but my own anthology, I have thought about it before, but it hasn't really happened because publishing is such a difficult world to get into. I'm not too sure about how self-publishing really works, how the logistics of that would be, but I think it could be quite expensive in the long run, but that is something I'd be willing to invest in. I'm not sure if my works are worth publishing in their own specific book. I'm not sure if people would actually buy them. I'm not sure how I'd go about promoting them. So I'm a bit unexperienced in that field. But it is a long-term goal that I've thought of doing. But I also have a Facebook blog, which I haven't updated on in a while, but there are a lot of my poems are on there. It's called Iona's Poems, and I'm sure you can find it if you just search it up. But I have posted some of my poems on there in the past, but nothing close to publishing personally. I have been published in other books, but not something of my own. So that is something I'd like to experiment in the future if people do show interest in it.
Yeah, I
I
asked you
think that
this because in this part of the world, here in Kerala, self-publishing has become very popular these days. I think I have at least 3 or 4 collections of young poets, your age, and
really?
I think it's quite popular. Although they haven't kind of advertised it much. Like, for example, people don't know that their collections are around. See,
Yeah.
there'll be a small reading function, and it will be brought out. Somebody will introduce it, and then people forget about it altogether. So that's why people don't know such a poet exists, or such a poet has published a collection. That's why I asked you this question. So I think it's time for you to think of probably it's what I think. I don't know if it's, how
Yeah,
viable it is or anything.
I've heard
I don't
quite
know.
a
I
lot.
really don't know.
This is quite unfortunate and disappointing. Sorry. I've heard something quite a lot. It's a bit unfortunate and disappointing, but people have said that poetry doesn't generally have as big a market as prose does in India and in the UK, because people say that poetry doesn't sell as well. I'm not sure why that is. I think it might be because it's a bit more of a difficult genre to understand. People don't it's not something that you can always grasp at face value. It usually takes a little bit more thought and reasoning. But I've heard people say that poetry is not as well selling, and so that makes me a little more reluctant, especially as a young poet, because as you said, people will release these collections, but then after a certain time, weeks or months, people around them start to forget and it just gets swept under basically. And there are a lot of famous bookshops in the UK, Waterstones, for example. I'm not sure how to go around getting my work published there and actually sold in bookshops, and how the financial aspect will work. I'm sure I probably have to start hiring an editor or contact like a publishing house or something. So it is a bit of a cumbersome task that I'm not familiar with, but I know a lot of people who I could get in touch with and ask about in relation to publishing. So that is one of my long-term goals that I would like to, go after. I think there's another question in the chat. Your story, Indigo's Adventures with Love, won the Wicked Young Writer Awards. Could you share about that? Of course. This was a competition that was held in, I can't remember if it was 2016 or 17, but it was a story competition that I entered. And my poem, my story, Indigo's Adventures with Love, it was inspired by my childhood again. When I grew up, I spent a lot of my young years in London, as I said, but also in Birmingham. And two of my neighbors who lived on either side of me, they were both English. So but at the same time, they're very welcoming and accepting of my family and our Indian culture. And there was an old man who was one of our neighbors, and he spent a lot of time with me as a child. He was very into nature, and he was also quite obsessed with Africa. And he was into geography and countries of the world. So he knew a lot about Africa, and so he taught me about the things he knew. He was also, I think he was a professor of zoology at a school or university which he worked at, so he was very knowledgeable about these types of things. And so he would often take me to his garden and show me around, like what things he'd planted, the significance behind each of them, bird houses and all sorts of things. And on the other side there was a friendly old woman. The old man was called Mike, by the way, and the old lady was called Dot, and she was more of your typical old British lady. She was obviously she was very old, so she'd experienced the whole wartime struggle that happened in the UK. She'd actually lost her husband because of war, and she'd experienced, rationing and the common things that happened in the world wars at that time. So she'd often talk about her experiences during then, especially living in Birmingham at the time, and how the World War affected cities in the UK. So they were both very different people who had very different lifestyles and different journeys behind them. So they offered me a lot of inspiration and insight into their lives, and that really influenced me as a young child. I was only about 3 or 4 at that time, but because I was constantly around people with such rich backgrounds, very different to mine, they shaped me as a person. And so I wrote this story, Indigo's Adventures with Love. It was partly autobiographical, actually. It describes a young girl called Indigo moving from India to Britain, and her experiences meeting different people in the UK, and how they all taught her concepts behind love as a whole. This was inspired by Mike and Dot, as I said. Obviously, I changed some of the names just for privacy purposes, but I have the story in front of me now, so I think it would be good if I shared it. Before then, I'd like to take a sip of water since my throat is really dry. Okay. Indigo's Adventures with Love. Have you ever thought about the geometry and feel of love? A line, a blob, an arc maybe. Soft as candy floss, squidgy as jelly beans, or effervescent as a fizzy drink. These questions left Indigo without any answer. In her tireless pursuit for love, almost like hide and seek, she felt completely exhausted. Each time she was just about to touch love, it vanished. Was love reality or an illusion? She asked. When 3, Indigo moved with family across continents from India to London. As the plane touched rainy Heathrow, it's raining cats and dogs. Indigo peeped from the window. Not one wet animal was in sight. Alien, the warmth of a tropical home, surrounded by love and friends, was no more. Saturday morning Skype session, a power distance of a button. However, the feel and touch of those clothes, Indigo realized that love bred from familiarity, proximity mattered too. Indigo did not let this pull her down. She decided to explore beauty in the world around, in the first blooming crocuses of spring, in the chime of Sunday church bells, in watching the canal boats sailing by, and in quiet picnics on lazy summer afternoons. In the library, she discovered new love, in glossy board books and animated music sessions in rhyme time. That nature, books, and music could substitute companionship left Indigo overwhelmed. In play school, she befriended Hayden, shy, autistic, and quiet. He spoke little and gestured more. Yet no love was lost in the unspoken and untold. So love comes without language, said Indigo. Unlike Hayden, Ling, her Chinese friend, was loud, confident, and cheeky. Like Indigo, Ling missed her family. She talked of exotic fire-spitting dragons and Chinese emperors in silken robes with pet nightingales. In Ling, Indigo discovered that opposites attracted love. But just as friendship blossomed, it was time for departure. A change in location was imminent in Dad's job. A new life was to unfold in brown paper boxes, goodbyes, and handshakes. Indigo felt rootless once more, a wandering gypsy with misplaced identity, dreading unforeseen adjustments and struggles. However, the house waited in an unknown neighborhood where less rushed folks always cared for a chat and smile. Dad was stressed, impatient, and always pressed for time. Thankfully, Mum's love was the only constant. Even love needs nurturing, sighed Indigo. In such trying times, Indigo's neighbor, Deb, arrived with all the attention and time Indigo craved for. Octogenarian, widower with dimpled cheeks and toothless smile, she lived by the Christian philosophy: love your neighbor as you love yourself. Sunday Mass and Tuesday coffee mornings were her excuse for socializing over endless cups of Earl Grey tea as she remembered Churchill, her war hero. Deb was very English in her flowery skirts, hats, pearls, afternoon teas, and Sunday roast. She loved baking, knitting, and soaps. She taught Mum to bake for Indigo's birthday, and how her heart swelled when the cake arose. Deb pampered Indigo with Easter cupcakes and hand-knitted Christmas jumpers. Gradually, the unknown evolved as a family. After all, people make a place, as they say. However, happiness was short-lived. Deb passed away in her sleep, a little too rushed, like a helium balloon flying off at the slightest excuse. Her playful cat, Penny, cried for nights till she stopped scratching on the front door. With Deb's exit ended love, defying boundaries of nationality, culture, religion, and age. By now, Indigo had started believing that love was ephemeral, lasting long enough only to be lost. It could be a tangent or an arc, certainly never a complete circle. However, in school one day, magic did unfold. Over circle time on friendship, make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver, the other is gold. A circle is round, it has no end. That's how long I will be your friend. No song had ever made more sense to India. It seemed her life's story, penned in the simplest words, totally comforting, and a solution to her adventures or misadventures with love. Everyone lost friends, but moving ahead was the key. Life could be simpler if old friends were remembered while new ones made. So cherishing love is important as long as it lasts, and when timely, in letting go, said Indigo, feeling less cynical. Head held high, she arose, a phoenix from the flames. Thank you. I thought I'd talk a little bit about the prize and award experience of this story. I got invited to read at the it was a very famous theatre in London. I think it's called the Royal Victoria Theatre. But what happened was I got to read in front of many individuals there who had come to watch me, and my certificate was even signed by the Duchess of Cornwall, Camilla. And I even got a certificate which was signed by a very famous author here called Cressida Cowell, who's written a series of books called How to Train Your Dragon. So this is a huge opportunity for me, and something special about this award, which is different from others, is that they announced the winners on the very day in which we were invited. So I was already shortlisted, and I knew that I was one of the people which had been chosen, but I didn't know if I'd actually won or not. It was only on that day when I was sitting down in the audience that I discovered that I was the winner in my category. And this was part of, obviously, the Wicked Young Writers Award, and Wicked is a musical that's held in the West End in London. So one of the actors from that musical, who played the character of Elphaba, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but that's the character she played. She actually read out my story on stage, and it was a great experience hearing everyone listen to it. So that was great. I'm really sorry I couldn't remember the name of the theatre. It's just that it's been such a long time since then, but I can definitely find out for you. Does anyone have questions? Oh yeah, stories. So obviously I've read a lot of my poems today. I thought it would be good if I read one of my stories just to change things up a bit. But I have made my entry into prose slowly. Obviously I'm more of a poet, but I do try experimenting with prose quite a bit too. Poetry is my first love because it's what I'm more comfortable with. But since I do a lot of creative writing at school as well, I'm trying to make an entry into prose because I think it's, again, such a diverse form of literature. And since books and most of the media I consume is prose, I think it would be good if I kind of expanded my horizon a little bit more. Does anyone have any questions, or do you think it would be good to end here since it's we've run a bit over time, but I'm not sure.
Hi, Iona.
Yeah.
My name is Devika, and
Uh-huh.
I'm little interested to know about your favorite month. Because I personally love October very much because October is a month of flower here. So I just need to know which one is your favorite month and what are the uh, colors or what are the specialities of that month. And can you tell me that?
Yeah, of course. All the months have some kind of significance to me. I was born in June, so that's my birthday month. So I definitely think I'm quite biased to June in a way because it's just such a fun summery time of year in which, and school is almost over at that time too, and I get to celebrate with my friends and family a lot during June, so I love that. But I do enjoy October too because because I'm Bengali, we have Durga Puja at that time. And although I can't experience the true fun and festivities of Durga Puja while being in India, especially in Kolkata, we do have like a number of associations and organizations here which hold Durga Pujas every year in October. So that's the time of year when I get to meet up with all of my friends and have a lot of fun, and that lasts about 4 days. So October and June are the months I look forward to in the year most. Besides that, I love August because there's no school during then. July is great too because school has a lot of less work pressure then too. But my favorite months are generally driven by the amount of pressure school gives me. So September is one of my least favorites because it's always the start of a new year and things can be quite difficult during that time. But yeah, June and October come under my top two. But in terms of what you said about colors and seasons, to be honest, living in the UK, it's rainy all year round. You can't really do anything about that since it's an island. It rains in summer, it rains in spring, it rains in autumn, it rains in winter, which I don't enjoy. But I think I'd still say summer because we have got quite a few heat waves this year and last year too, which I'm happy for, but also it can get quite excruciating at times because there's no air conditioning here, so it gets very hot when it goes up to around 30 degrees. But summer is my favorite. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Iona.
I can finish off with one last poem. Since I was talking about spring and summer and those types of happy, joyful seasons, I thought I could read one of my poems titled Spring. So here we go. Spring. April is calling you, her Ava Gardner voice, breathy and sweet, like fresh honey and cream in a green bowl. You see her apparition floating in the breeze on a lonely cloud. Blue irises in her locks, grass-stained dress and yellow galoshes, muddy but pure. And you can smell the earth after the rain, evocative, rejuvenating your soul from the depths of winter. You brush your hand against the loam and sprinkle it on your skin, your heart awash with dew. And she asks you, and you take her hand and leave, a spring in your step. So that's one of my nature poems. Since I mentioned how I'm inspired by Rabindranath Tagore's nature poetry, and obviously I've read a lot of Ted Hughes's nature poetry before, I thought it would be good to read one of the works that was directly inspired by their work. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm not sure if we want to end the session here, if anyone has anything else to say, but please do let me know.
Do you have any more questions?
I think there's...
Iona, there's a question in the chat box.
Being a very creative person, who or what is your inspiration? I think inspiration can come in many forms. A lot of people assume that because I'm a poet or a writer, all my inspiration comes from books and literature that I consume. But I don't think it's just that. I think poetry inspiration can come from TV shows, music, life experiences, anything really. But I think a lot of my inspiration around me is from people, actual people who I've spent time with, and those who are around me who have something insightful and different to offer in my experiences with them. So I think my parents are definitely a huge inspiration for me because they're like basically my main driving force in what I do. But I'd say a lot of my school experiences, my teachers, people I meet in events and things, they also provide a huge form of inspiration. And I think subconsciously, a lot of my poetry can relate to some past anecdote in my life. I read a lot of poems today, and I think you may have I think you may have noticed that a lot of them have little anecdotes slipped into them. And whether you realize it or not, those are things that have appeared subconsciously from my life and experiences I've drawn from there. And so I think it's a huge misconception, and it's not true at all, that inspiration only comes from reading and writing if you're a poet. you can take inspiration from whatever you do as long as you use it right, and I strongly stand by that.
Iona, just tell us something about your future plans. Means, what do you plan to be like? Means, do you want to major in literature, or means coming from an engineering background as well, which I know. Means, do you want to go for science, or what are your future plans?
So, well, my mum, her subject is geography. My dad's is chemistry. So I've got a science and a humanity on either side. So I haven't been given a kind of biased view in that sense. But I'm pretty much certain that I don't want to do anything science related in the future, just because it's not something that interests me as much. I think I'm more inclined to the humanities and literature as a whole, and arts in general. I think it gives me more freedom of expression, and I like how in the arts and humanities there's no one correct answer, whereas in science there's often a lot of restrictions that are faced because it's not more textbook driven, I feel like. But science too does have many amazing possibilities. There's the chance for you to discover something on your own, but I think the school system and education system is incredibly flawed in that way, because a lot of the things we learn are not always useful in our everyday lives, and they're also not taught to us in an interesting way. It seems like we're almost swallowing textbooks and regurgitating the knowledge we know for them during exams. So I don't really feel like I have a passion for the sciences. So in the future, I'd like to do something probably relating to English. But in Oxford University here, they offer a course called PPE for university, which stands for Politics, Philosophy, Economics. That's something which I'm aspiring to hopefully do, because I think it encompasses all the things I'm interested in. But in terms of the near future, recently I entered this summer school, which is organized by the Oxford University and the John Locke Institute there, where they host this annually, and it's from the ages of around 14 to 19, I think, where they allow people in that age group to learn more about the PPE degree, and especially like geography, history, economics, politics, etc. And that's a 10-day summer school, which I'll be attending there at Oxford University. And I'm going there on the 12th of August. So I have 2 residentials lined up right next to each other, one poetry residential in Shropshire and one for Oxford. So those are 2 places I'm looking to go to gain more inspiration for not just my writing, but everything I do in life, really. And I think that'll be really insightful for me as an individual. Yeah, those are my future goals. In terms of career plans, I'm not sure if I want to be a full-time writer or poet just yet, because I know that starting off in literature can be quite difficult because it's not the most well-paying profession ever. You really have to get your work recognized and known to the public widely before it actually providing you a stable source of income. And so I think that can be quite difficult to manage financially. But I would like to start off as a like a kind of preliminary job before I look into writing or poetry more, and maybe look at that as a kind of side profession. But I have decided some of the fields that I'd like to go into, but not sure about the current, decided career path yet.
Okay, all the very best, Iona, to you and to all of you. Okay, great. Okay, over to Sharif, sir.
There was a request from Iona's mother in the chat box. Did you see that? She wants us all to keep cameras open for a moment so that we become visible. I said probably we don't have such good keepsake faces, but it's a good idea. So why not keep the cameras open for a moment so that everybody is visible, right? Yeah, I'm opening.
Yeah, please turn on
camera.
your cameras, everyone. I've turned on mine.
Yes. Please turn on your cameras. All of you, please.
Anju.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Okay, that will be fine. No?
Please, all of you. Just one snap. One snap. All of you, please. Agenda, Fida, Elizabeth, Archida, Alicia, Anju, Akila, all of you. Please. Yeah. Just for a moment. Please turn on your cameras. Okay. That's all. All right. So,
Okay.
Asha, if there are no more
Yes, sir.
questions, we'll
Yeah.
close the session. Please do the formalities.
So I hope there are no more questions. Anyone? Okay. So thank you, Iona. We are winding up. Thank you for joining us. It was a very great experience listening to you and listening to your poems and your experiences, your life there. It was wonderful listening to you. So thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you.
All
Thank
the
you. It
best
was a
for
great
your,
pleasure to
yeah,
be here.
all the very best for your poetic career and all your future endeavors. And dear teachers and students, thank you for joining. Thank you, everyone. We'll meet next week.
Thank you, everyone. It's been great to be here today. I hope to see you again sometime, maybe.
Very sure.